Okay, so I suppose welcome everybody to the Gaelic for Mothers and Others SportsDirect webinar series. This is the third in the series. If you haven't checked out the other two, make sure you log on to ladiesgaelic.ie and go to the Gaelic for Mothers and Others section and check out the SportsDirect webinar series section on the tabs on the right hand side. So as I said, this is the third installment, following on from the A to Z of Gaelic for Mothers and Others and Healthy on the Pitch and Healthy on the Plate, which was the one prior to this. So as I said, you are very welcome along to join on this webinar with us. So there are a full series of webinars to select from over the coming months. As you can see there, we've already done the January, February, and tonight we are on the March offering. So next month we have growing your group, recruiting, integrating, and bonding members of your group, and that will be with myself and a guest presenter. So make sure you mark that in your diary, and make sure you check it out on ladiesgaelic.ie as well. As you can see, we have May and June offerings there as well, and you can register for those webinars on the link at the very bottom of your screen at the moment, so be sure to check those out. So on this webinar, I am delighted to welcome Fionnuala McAtamney. Fionnuala has presented for us on a number of occasions, and I am delighted that she agreed to come back on board this evening for this specific Gaelic for Mothers and Other SportsDirect webinar, specifically targeted at participants such as yourselves who are taking part in Gaelic for Mothers and Others, either as a participant or a coordinator or a coach, or maybe just somebody with a passing interest. So I will let Fionnuala do her own introductions. Fionnuala, thanks a million for coming on board with us this evening. Really delighted to have you on board with us.
Thanks for having me, Vinny. Pleasure to be here.
So look, Fionnuala is a consultant psychologist, and as I said, she's going to do her own intro, but she's also a former Armagh lady senior footballer and coach as well of the lady senior football team. So she has vast experience of the game itself. So make sure that if you do have any questions, just type in the chat function. And I would be way out of my depth trying to talk about tonight's topic, and Fionnuala is an absolute expert on it. As you can see, a consultant psychologist. So I am literally just going to monitor the chat this evening, if that's okay, Fionnuala. And I'll let you take over. So I hope everybody enjoys this evening, and we will re-engage with you at the end.
Yeah, Vinny, thanks very much for having me. Thanks for asking. And as always, it's a pleasure to be here. As you say, I've done a couple of these webinars before, and my experience so far has been that they're always really well attended and really well engaged with, from our Gaelic for Mothers and Others participants. So this evening, I suppose we were kind of talking about something that came about from the player welfare health checklist that we had done with the ladies GFA a while ago, and on the back of that there's been a series of short videos made with regards to looking after yourself and trying to keep a healthy balance, I suppose, on and off the pitch. So just to give everybody a bit of a context then to this evening's presentation, so Vinny and I had a bit of a chat then about that and about how we could make it applicable to Gaelic for Mothers and Others. And so this evening's session, really kind of what I wanted to talk about are some of the main things just with regards to taking care of yourself, giving back to yourself, ways in which to find a healthy balance through self-care, and the 5 main areas in which to kind of achieve that or do that. And as I say, I don't know that I need any more introductions with regards to myself. I work as a consultant psychologist in our NHS here in County Armagh, and I've been just involved with ladies football for many years, more years than I can count at this stage. So if you kind of just want to scoot on then, Vinny, to that next slide. As I said, the context that was from the player welfare checklist of that, and the 5 main areas really that we're going to touch on this evening are areas of nutrition and exercise, sleep, screen time, social connection, self-care and regulation, and focus. And funny, when we were thinking about the PowerPoint or the presentation this evening, the idea being is that we would present something with regards to self-care, giving back to yourself, that would be for yourselves as participants of Gaelic for Mothers and Others, But what struck me as I was going through some of the material and pulling it together a bit, that those areas that I would want to talk about, things to do with exercise and nutrition, the sleep, screen, social connection, regulating yourself and focus, the things that we kind of need to keep ourselves well and healthy, both from a physical point of view and emotional and psychological point of view. It struck me that the Gaelic4Mothers&Others initiative in itself, could be and is one of those key strategies, that people would use in order to achieve some balance with regards to exercise, having being connected with other people, having some fun and enjoyment, and finding ways in which through that activity that we get to kind of regulate yourself and also get to find some balance in your life. So what's interesting to me is that while I'm talking to yourselves as participants of Gaelic4Mothers&Others, with regards to these 5 areas, that actually the Gaelic4Mothers&Others in itself, it provides a real good opportunity in which some of these 5 things or these key things can be achieved. So if you want to click on then, Vinny, we'll not spend too much time on the nutrition and exercise. It's a bit self-explanatory. And my understanding is that you've had a really excellent presentation prior to this with regards to nutrition, healthy food for the pitch and off it. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but really just to set a context, with regards to it, as everybody knows, that those 3 main pillars of a healthy lifestyle are sleep, diet, and exercise. That actually, the key to this is in around the word balance, and how it's not having too much of one thing or the other, but really having that key balance of those 3 pillars just from a physical health point of view. It's important to get that right from the start. So having a good sleep, diet and exercise habits not only reduces the risk of physical health problems. Everybody's really knows about that. That's the only thing that we all kind of talk about in terms of, losing a bit of weight, feeling a wee bit healthier. Everybody has to eat healthy and do a bit of exercise. We know what that's about with regards to their physical health. But actually there's been more research that's been done recently with regards to the impact of it on our emotional and mental health issues. And that with regards to that, it's also there's been a bit of research that shows that it's got some great potential with regards to improving our learning and performance. So when we talked about this before with players at inter-county level, what we were talking about was that getting the balance right between good diet, good exercise, good sleep routines, essentially that it wasn't just so much that you would be fitter on the pitch, but actually that what some studies have shown is that it also improves people's accuracy, people's concentration. And that really what we talk about is that it improves your cognitive functioning. Essentially that also is enables you to make better decisions on the pitch. For me then, that while that's kind of relevant, just talking to athletes about the pitch, it's also just applies to our normal lives then, as well, that actually getting a good balance of the sleep, the diet, and the exercise leads us to having good emotional and mental health, kind of well-being and physical well-being that allows us to perform in whatever it is and whatever capacity it is that we're performing in. If it's in the capacity of being a mum, if the capacity of being a sister, capacity of being, an employee, at work, if it's the committee member and so on. So the exercise, as I say, and this is what I'm thinking about with the Gaelic4Mothers&Others, it gives you an opportunity to get that type of exercise in, without it having to be mental, going to the gym every kind of day stuff. It doesn't need to be at an extreme. The key point is just around the balance of that. And with the Gaelic4Mothers&Others, it's a real opportunity. I thought when I was kind of thinking about it, that it's an opportunity to provide that moderate intensity of a bit of an exercise, that what we know helps with our immune system, what we know also helps with improving mood and cognitive functioning, and also is linked to lower incidence of mental illness right across, the lifespan, and actually increases their lifespan. So people who do more regular exercise tend to have longer life expectancy, so to speak. And again, the same with the nutrition that we have talked about. If you want to hit the next slide. And so I'm going to spend a wee bit more time then talking about the sleep bit, because primarily we just think about it as getting some rest. And so we wake up the next morning and we feel a bit more restful and we can go about our business. But it is a little bit more kind of complicated than that, and really more important than that. So what we find is that, people with with really busy lifestyles, we probably aren't getting as enough sleep as we can. And while we try to eat healthily during the day, while we try to get a wee bit of exercise in, actually one of the things that we also need to spend a wee bit more time on is trying to get the right amount of sleep and the right type of sleep as well. And the reason for that being is that what we know is like sleep plays a real big role with regards to our hormonal regulation. If you go back, saying that slide, yeah, come on. That we know that the hormones such as ghrelin and leptin, are involved with our appetite regulation. So if you get a good night's sleep, it's another way of restacking the odds when it comes to making good choices around eating habits. So we've, for most of us, or maybe I can only speak for myself about this, various attempts to lose weight and so on. I've been in and around doing a wee bit more exercise, kind of watching what you're eating, but more recently finding out and realizing that the importance of sleep with regards to that actually increases your ability to stick to good healthy eating habits during the day, as well as the hormones that it impacts upon. Sleep also is really important with regards to the resting and repairing of cells. So that's really what the function of it is at nighttime. So we repair our physical cells in our body, but we also repair cells in our brain that are responsible for our cognitive functioning. And cognitive function is just another way for saying that we're all doing a lot of human stuff that we do, like making decisions, problem solving, reading, writing, concentrating on work and so on. So people who improve the quality of their sleep make significant improvements, both in physical, emotional and cognitive well-being. Now, everybody will probably have known and heard that you should get 8 hours sleep. Research says that you should try to get somewhere between 7 to 9 hours sleep. But what's really important more for me is around understanding what your sleep-wake cycle is, which is what we would call your circadian rhythm. So some people, and especially as we get a little bit older, we don't require as much sleep as what we do when younger. So you kind of think about, the kids you may have had and how much they sleep when they're little babies compared to now at this age, how much we can sleep. And so that changes over the course of the lifespan. And some of us are a little bit different with that. So usually what I'd say to people is don't be getting too hang up if you don't get your 7 hours or your 9 hours or your 8 hours. Actually, what you should do is pay a little bit more attention to what your circadian rhythm is. So really, essentially what that is our 24, inside us, we have a 24 internal clock that's running in the background of your brain, and it cycles between sleepiness and alertness. So it works best whenever you have a regular sleeping habit. So like going to bed and waking up in the morning are in and around the same times. So you'll kind of notice that. Probably already notice it, but if you haven't, think about it maybe then this week for the rest of the week, thinking about what my circadian rhythm is, so to speak. Notice the time where you start to get a little bit sleepy at night. Most of us, when we get a little bit sleepy at night, it's probably we think in our heads it's too early and we've got too much more stuff to do. So we probably do another half an hour cleaning the house or tidying up again or getting some work done for the next day, or spending a wee bit more time on social media, or trying to binge that extra episode in Netflix or whatever it is. And we fight the sleep a little bit because we're thinking, oh, it's a bit too early to go. And then in the morning time, when we wake up, you're kind of like, oh my God, there's 5 o'clock. I'm not getting on this. It's too early. It's too early. And then we kind of end up sleeping on a little bit. And so we end up thinking, because we need to get the 8 hours or the 7 hours, or even if we're used to getting 6, we're thinking about that. So what I would say to you is to pay attention to when it is that your body is naturally starting to go to sleep, and then notice in the mornings when it naturally starts to wake up at. That doesn't necessarily mean the time now that you're getting out of your bed at, but notice just the time that you're starting to wake up. And that might give you a wee bit of a clue as to what your circadian rhythm is if you click on to the next. So again, that usually changes. So back in our 20s, we could stay up to like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and get up at 7 the next day. Whereas at the minute, if a TV program goes on at after 9, I usually don't see the end of it, I have to say. So with that in mind, then if you kind of start to notice what your circadian rhythm is, see if you can try to get into a bit of a routine then by actually going to bed and going to sleep whenever it is that you feel whenever it is you feel tired. Now, I know there's probably people listening to this going, yeah, but I still have another 2 hours of stuff to do. And that's a bit kind of then in terms of thinking about the self-care part of it. So something around, there are things that we'll have to do that are important to us in life, that I would kind of call our non-negotiables. Like we'll have to do those things every day in order for us to feel good, in order for us to get things done and achieved. And then there's other stuff in our lives that we do every day that probably are what I would call negotiables then. So things like scrolling on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever it is, watching the extra couple of episodes of EastEnders or whatever show is on Netflix. Those are negotiable things. So when it comes to thinking about how do I fit all this stuff into my busy day and pay attention to my sleep cycle, then think about those things that in your life that are the negotiables that you can maybe pull out of your day that gives you a wee bit more room during the day to do the non-negotiable stuff, like things like, feeding kids and getting kids ready to go to basketball and football and everything else that you might need to do. So with that in mind, then to give your chance to make the best quality of sleep, as well as trying to think about the amount of sleep that you get, then really what we're talking about is the hygiene in and around that. So what your body needs in order to fall asleep is a drop in your heart rate, and it needs a drop in your core temperature as well. That's why the people said don't be taking a bath before you go to sleep, because what you're doing is increasing the temperature of your body with regards to that. So you need a drop in your heart rate, you need a drop in your core temperature, and your body needs an increase in the melatonin, that production that comes usually through natural darkness. So whenever it gets really dark outside, you'll notice that that's when it kind of kicks into feeling a wee bit more sleepy. So at the minute it's getting a wee bit brighter in the mornings, you might notice that you're waking up a wee bit more. Because there's the melatonin starting to dissipate at that stage. So tips in around, sleep hygiene then, or try to have your bedroom at a slighter lower temperature than the rest of the house. Try to reduce the artificial light from screens such as TVs and laptops and phones. So big argument in my house, didn't want a TV in the bedroom. I didn't win that argument, I have to say. But the best thing to do is not to have the TV in it. But I also know that the reality of his normal life now in this world is that people have phones in beds with them and we're kind of scrolling through it. So what I would say is that it's a wee bit individual. People do need a little bit of noise to fall asleep. Some people need a little bit of light, to fall asleep as well. Some people need to watch a bit of TV. And as I say, most people are scrolling on their phones now. So I'm not saying that people should make mad radical lifestyle changes here and get rid of the phones. Again, it's thinking about the key word around balance and having a bit of balance around it. So it's not so much about what you're doing on your phone at night, or it's not so much how much time you're spending on it, but it's more about what it is that you're doing right before you go to sleep. So if you are listening to a meditation app on it, there are other apps available, but I really like the Calm app. It gives you some sleep stories that you can listen to, but I use my phone for that. So I'm not saying ban the phone out of the bedroom. So you can use it for those types of things. And that kind of help with the relaxation, help with kind of getting yourself over to sleep. As I said, it's more to do with what you're doing on it. So if you're spending lots of time on social media and reading stuff at the minute, most of the stuff that is on social media is around the news about Ukraine, what's happening, about the cost of living crisis and so on. We're also kind of on social media looking at other people's lives and how everything is really glossy and lovely and everything else, and you're supposed to be doing all these things. And most of the time that actually increases your heart rate a little bit. Actually feels a wee bit anxious. Maybe you're kind of reading stuff in the news, it's a wee bit kind of distressing and so on. And so the scrolling through social media, usually increases heart rate rather than lowering it. And that's why it goes against, the chances of you falling asleep. Now, you might fall asleep, but usually what it means is that you haven't fallen asleep into, like a deeper one with regards to that. And as I say, it's not to say that you have to ban the phone altogether. You can use it to watch something funny, to listen to music, do some meditation essentially with it. And those are the types of things that would reduce your heart rate and maximize the potential for your sleep with regards to it. You will kind of notice that those times whenever you wake up in the morning and you kind of think to yourself, well, it's a bit too early, you can't get up, and you roll back over to sleep again, you actually think that because you're getting an extra few, maybe half an hour or an hour, that you're getting more sleep. But the difficulty with that, because you're going against your circadian rhythm, is that you're starting a new sleep cycle. And at nighttime, whenever we go to sleep, we have a sleep cycle to go through, that starts off with kind of like a light sleep that ends up going into like a deep sleep that ends up going into what they call an REM sleep, where you do lots of dreaming, and then you come out of that sleep again to like a wake state. So whenever you start a new sleep cycle by rolling over and kind of resisting your circadian rhythm, you end up in a new sleep cycle. And then to wake up at it at the time that you want to get up at means that you're coming out of a sleep cycle. So invariably, you kind of will notice that even though you think you got an extra half hour or an extra 45 minutes, because you've kind of gone against the rhythm of your body, whenever you get up, actually you don't feel as rested as possible. I have to say, if I'm being really honest, it took me a while to believe in this bit myself. But when I notice it now and pay attention to that, and so I go to sleep at the time that my body is saying that and waking up in the morning, you definitely feel the difference with regards to the energy levels that you have. Okay, Benny, come to the next one. And so I was finishing there with regards to the screen time thing. It is the big thing it's kind of a bit controversial, what I said about, having negotiable things in your life that you might want to kind of reduce a little bit or let go of during the day if life is really kind of busy. Scrolling through your screen time, might be one of those things that you kind of let go of. As I'd say, it's not that it's completely bad. Go back to the thing, it's just around the balance of it and how much we can use it for. It has made so many positive contributions, to our lives. But there has been increasing research with regards to the link between the overuse of social media and screen time with poor well-being. And for me, the reason for that is, again, it's just whenever the social media companies essentially use, I've kind of talked about how they use the same technology as Las Vegas slot machines, essentially. The technologies in terms of linking to the software kind of algorithms. So they are designed based around, if you think about Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and so on, it's about how many likes people get. It's about how many, views people get and so on. And because we are social creatures that need the approval, of the rest of our peers, what we are programmed with regards to the biology of ourselves is that we're programmed to get a little bit of a hit of dopamine every time, we get one of those kind of likes. It's the same as the slot machines. You put the 10p in, you don't get something, but there's a chance that you might win, so it creates an expectation in you but really what happens in your brain with that is you get a little bit of a hit of dopamine that goes with that. So it's designed to reward you. It's designed to get you attracted and to come back. And so that's where the two things are similar in that sense. So you might notice this yourself, just your phone goes, is it hard to put it down? If it beeps, how long does it take, before you go and lift it? Is it hard to resist it, for a while? And it's not to say that there's anything wrong with anybody that does that. That's what they're designed to do, essentially. So usually what I'll say to, what we've kind of said before, with regards to, the other athletes, is try to reduce that. Try, we do so much of the things in our phones at the minute that we try to keep that to maybe 2 hours a day. And as I said, then with regards to, getting yourself ready for good quality sleep, it's probably best to stay off those type of platforms before we go to sleep. Really, the key is the balance. And like any kind of activity that gives us an instant reward, even if it's like your wee favorite glass of wine of a Friday night, too much of it, because of the reward system that it activates in our brains, too much of it causes difficulties. And that's the same as anything that causes us to have a really good feeling. So you're okay, Penny? But the social media thing and the screen time thing that we use mostly for is around connecting with people. So it is good in that sense. It is good to have a different way to stay connected. And certainly over the last 2 years, with COVID, the use of technology and our screens, became part and parcel of our lives. Not lost in the irony of us doing a webinar this evening, as opposed to us all tripping to some GAA club in the middle of Ireland somewhere for a ham sandwich and a cup of tea as we listen to this. So it has so many benefits, and that we're able to kind of reach out, to people, and it does appeal to that sense of, that natural instinct that we have, as human beings, that we are social creatures. But what I would say is that as social creatures, that how we developed, through evolution, not to get too nerdy on it, I have to say, but we have developed as social creatures because, like millions of years ago, as we were all kind of evolving into the humans that we are, we lived in a world in which there were way more dangerous and vicious creatures on the planet than us, like dinosaurs and lions and all that kind of stuff. And so on a one-to-one scenario with those creatures, we would never have survived. So the only way for us, as we were developing, into humans, to survive would to be to evolve in groups. So it's in our nature to be in groups. We have families. We, like this, we have the Gaelic4Mothers&Others groups. We join football clubs and teams and so on, and do lots of activities through groups. That's how we lead our lives now. But actually the reason why we're inclined and attracted to that was around millions of years ago, when whenever we had to develop like that in order to survive. So one of us against the lion, wouldn't have been any good. 20 to 30 of us had a good chance of killing the lion. And so our social connection, our ability and desire and need to be connected to others is based on our survival instinct. And so while we always talk about having good exercise, enough exercise and good nutrition, and what we talked about is just good sleep, for me, then the extra bit of it, is around the social connection. That is, for me, just as important, because that is as linked to our survival, to our emotional health and well-being as the food and the exercise. And with that, then it's no surprise that there are lots of studies to talk about how our physical and emotional health well-being improves whenever we spend time with our friends, whenever we practice kindness to others, and whenever we surround ourselves with people who we can be ourselves with and have fun with. And so in some ways, while that might sound really kind of obvious, and of course we'll have a good time, I suppose the point that I'm making about this is not actually just about having the good time. This is actually about the taking care of ourselves bit. This is something that's a fundamental need in all of us, is that we need to have that connection. We need to spend time with other people that are like us, and to have fun with. And that, what I'm saying that is that sometimes I think those are the things that we think are luxuries. Sometimes we put them down as the negotiables, whereas I would say and argue that they are the non-negotiables, in the same way that you wouldn't have eaten during the day as a negotiable. You have to eat in order to survive. You have to do some kind of exercise in order to be healthy. What I would say is that this social connection part of it is something that is fundamental to people's physical and health and well-being. It's a non-negotiable, and we have to do it in order to be able to survive well. And then, Vinny, when we were kind of chatting about this, that was a bit that kind of struck me around actually, this Gaelic4Mothers&Others is actually the strategy, a key strategy, and how you get to achieve all of these things. When you think about, for the likes of, you kind of said earlier on, I did a bit of football myself. When I kind of think about that, these are the things that, joining a football team, hanging out with your friends, it give you all of that stuff. It give you the exercise, it give you the social connection. It allowed you to be yourself for a bit, and to be and spend time with like-minded people. And back in the day, we just used to think, oh, sure, it was just good crack. And it is good crack. But what I would say is that it's more than that. It's a fundamental, key part of taking care of yourself, and keeping yourself emotionally and physically well. And so I'm saying that is because I would say that when we kind of think of our busy lives that we have, it might be the thing that you're tempted to give up on. It might be the thing that you're tempted to miss, the session this week because you got too busy or have got too much thing on. So what I would probably encourage people is that if you're ever feeling like that, if you're feeling that, things are a wee bit too stressful and it's too busy at the minute, that I don't have time to make it to my Gaelic4Mothers&Others session, I would say then that is a signal to say, oh my God, I definitely have to go. In the sense that you're saying to yourself, my life is, stretching me too much at the minute, so I need to take care of myself. Because if we stretch ourselves too far, that's whenever we get too stressed. And so whenever we have too much stress in our lives, the balance goes out of sync. So with that in mind, it's more about thinking, if anybody's giving you a wee bit of hassle about why you go into that Gaelic4Mothers&Others, you are able to say to them, it's my self-care. This is my key non-negotiable self-care strategy that we're using to keep me right. If you click on the next slide, I think there might be something on that. Yeah. So the last thing I kind of want to talk about then, with regards to kind of self-care and taking care of yourself, is this thing around regulation and focus. So the other things were things that are in some ways kind of outside your body. So like you go to, you get from others on other session, you go out to meet friends, you get, you go and do things that are getting you kind of connected with people. You try to get better sleep. You do some exercise. You make some choices around having some better food, but there's other stuff that goes on in some ways kind of inside our heads and inside our hearts that also we can usually do a little bit better at with regards to taking care of ourselves. So those are things around managing our thoughts, managing how it is that we think about stuff. So, I mean, it's not really for this evening, but it's really kind of just to touch on it is that, people have different thinking styles. So we have different ways of thinking about ourselves, different ways of thinking about other people. We have core beliefs about ourselves, and we have particular styles that we are more kind of likely to fall into than not. So some of those may be like a really positive thinking style, some of them might be a negative thinking style. So if somebody asks you to do something, you might have a thinking style that automatically makes you say, oh God, no, I couldn't do that. Like I wouldn't be good enough to do that. And if you were asking someone else to do something and they said that back to you, you would be saying to them, of course you're good enough to do that. So what I'm kind of getting at now is then that leads into our thinking styles, leads into usually how it is that we talk to ourselves. And I don't mean talk to ourselves as when we're walking down the street and we're talking out loud. If that's happening, perhaps maybe, we should be worried a little bit about our emotional and mental health. But I'm talking about our kind of internal voice, the voice that we talk to ourselves with. And it's thinking about those types of things usually we can get a little bit better at. So I'm sure I'm not the only person, who does something or makes a mistake and might say something like, oh, for God's sake, you stupid flip and blah, blah, to themselves, right? I think it's kind of what we do. But when it comes to the sport, we kind of talk a little bit about this a wee bit more in depth with our athletes, like kind of how we talk to ourselves, creates a certain level of feeling within ourselves, and what we're trying to create within ourselves because we, are trying to take care of ourselves a wee bit better, to give back to ourselves a wee bit more, is then usually what I'll say to people is like, talk to yourself then how you would talk to your best friend, and if you wouldn't take that off your best friend, then don't take it off yourself. Now that's easier said than done, and we usually need to spend a wee bit of time practicing on that. But those are some of the things with regards to the managing of thoughts and challenging that. So challenging the self-talk. So in sports psychology, they talk a lot about self-talk and how people talk to themselves and affirmations. And, there's particular exercises that we can do to kind of help that and improve that. But it's no different in sport than it is in real life, and just in normal day-to-day life, and how it is that we talk to ourselves. So those are kind of one of the things in terms of giving back to yourself, give back to yourself, a language that you would only use for, your best friends, essentially. in relation to then other kind of worrying thoughts or anxiety thoughts that, cause you to feel kind of stressed. Usually when that happens, it means that we're thinking about something that's in the past or the future. Being able to stay focused in the here and now, like to be present in the moment, or as it's usually called at the minute, to being mindful, is an important tool to be able to achieve a healthy emotional balance. So you've probably heard people talk a lot about, mindfulness, and it, you can go on courses to that, and you can train in it, and you can spend a lot of time dedicating yourself to being completely more mindful. But I would say, again, it's around the balance of it. You don't necessarily need to do that. There are ways in the here and now, day to day, that we can just practice being a little bit more mindful. And really what I mean by that is practicing just being in the here and now. So again, what I would say to you, think about the last thing that you're worried about. Think about the last thing that you're anxious about. And when you're having those feelings, were you thinking about something that was going to happen, or were you thinking about something that had already happened? And the thing about that, something that's going to happen and something that has happened before, actually those things are outside of our control. And where the feelings of anxiety come from is that when we're spending time thinking about stuff that's outside of our control, because there's uncertainty around it. So trying to use phrases like here and now as triggers to help you kind of stay focused in the present or in the moment that's under your control. So when you have those feelings of anxiety, worried about something that's happening, it's things like, okay, well, what can I do now? What's happening now? What's happening here, right now, in this moment? And what can I do about it now? And then that's the trigger, or that's the kind of distraction point in which you can try to change thoughts and feelings, essentially. The regulation bit refers to our feelings and, whether they're up or down, lowering levels of stress. And in that sense, then, effective regulation strategies such as breathing exercises, meditation, and not only lower levels of stress and anxiety, but they also promote emotional health and self-awareness. They'll lengthen your attention span, improve your sleep, and control your pain. And so the reason why that happens is because whenever we've got really kind of strong emotions going on, like stress or anxiety, the part of your brain that's activated with regards to that, usually in work, I talk with our young people around having 3 parts to their brain. So they have like a life brain, the part of their brain that's responsible for keeping them alive. Those are the bits that's connected to, sending messages to your heart and your lungs and all your bodily organs to keep it going. Then you have a part of your brain, with several parts of your brain, but I usually with our young people will talk about it's their emotional brain. It's where they have all of the feelings that they should have. And then you have a thinking brain, which is really kind of your neocortex, the bit that makes us more human than the rest of the mammals on the planet. And that's our thinking brain. And the thing about it is that whenever we're having really, really strong emotions, it means then that the part of our brain that's really active and really strong and pretty much sucking up most of the blood flow is the emotional brain. But the idea then, if it's sucking up from some of that blood flow, it's sucking it from somewhere else, which is usually our thinking brain. So most of the times whenever we're having really strong emotions, our neocortex in some ways, for want of a better phrase, in some ways it goes offline. It's not really kind of working that much. So you think about the last time you had an argument with somebody, and you were really, really cross. You probably either said something that you regret saying because you weren't thinking straight, or you come away from the argument and you didn't say half the stuff that you wanted to say because you weren't able to think straight and get the words out. Think about the last time when you actually had fallen in love, and like it was all mad, brilliant stuff. And think about all the daft things that you did whenever you were courting for the first time, and trying to woo somebody over. Like you wouldn't be doing them now, 15 years into marriage, you're not doing any of that stuff now, so the idea being is that because whenever we have those strong emotions, usually what I say, whenever the emotional brain's up and then your thinking brain's down. And so if that is over a prolonged period of time, if we're stressed, all day, every day, for a longer period of time, then our emotional brain is the strongest part. It's the one that's operating the most. So our thinking brain isn't getting enough energy. It just can't function, as well as it should. And so with that, then we do need to find ways, week to week, in which we can release some of that stress and some of that anxiety. And that then ties into, well, let's think about what are those things. Those things are the things that we've just talked about. Getting connected with friends, spending a bit of time with friends, having some fun, getting some exercise, getting some good sleep. And then what we know now, increasingly know more now about nutrition, is that there are foods and healthy diets that actually lower levels of cortisol within our bodies, which is the hormone that's linked to stress. That we've got some foods that can reduce inflammation within our bodies. Inflammation that's also linked to stress. So if you click on to the next slide, then Vinny, probably should be our last one. Yeah, so then what you end up with is a matrix of all of this stuff. So all of this stuff is absolutely connected with each other. So, and like that, then to find the balance, to find the well-being balance of that, we need decent amounts of all of this stuff together. So we need a good, so it's not to be like super Gwyneth Paltrow clean eating all the time, or like an Olympic athlete doing loads of exercise, or like your 14-month-old baby sleeping loads and around the clock. Or you don't need to be a social butterfly out every single night of the week anymore, because we're just, well, certainly I'm not fit for that anywhere anyway. What you need is some of all that, and some of all that in balance, in order to have, good balance within your life. It kind of struck me that the title of this week of the night's presentation was Giving Back to Yourself. And I probably haven't said too much towards that, but what I was thinking about was in that is that normally you attend these things and you hear, I suppose in some ways, for want of a better word, lectures, and everybody knows we got to eat better and sleep better and, do some more exercise and all that kind of stuff. And we think about those things as things that we have to do. The interesting thing about the psychology of having to do stuff is that humans don't really like being told what to do either, and we tend to resist that a little bit, so when you think it's something that you have to do, we can't think about, some of us might be in the middle of Lent at the minute, thinking about all those things that you can't have, that you're not allowed to have. As soon as somebody tells you you're not allowed to have something, don't you just want it? Like we just want it. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. And so it's the same thing as, being told that you have to do something. Your brain goes, no, I'm not doing that. And so we tend then to resist it a little bit. We give in easier, to bad habits around eating. We give in easier to not going to the gym, or not getting good enough sleep, or not spending time, with our friends. And so rather than these be the normal things around getting lectured on how it is that you should do things better, this isn't about what you should do. This is about, for me, giving back to yourself. So these are the things that we know that have us be well, that allow us to be happy and healthy in ourselves. And so if we're not the people that are going to treat ourselves like this, if we're not the people that are going to take care of ourselves, who else is going to do that? We're going to have to rely on other people to do that. But then that's stuff that's outside of our control, and so always in sports psychology, they talk about controlling the controllables, so what we can control is how we treat ourselves. What we control is how we talk to ourselves. But on how we talk to ourselves, then it's not that you have to do this. And what I would say to you is that if anything comes up where you're thinking, oh, I have to, if you just change a little bit slightly the wording of that to, well, I'm going to, so rather than I have to eat healthy, changes to, well, I'm going to eat healthy. Then the question is, well, why are you going to eat healthy? Well, I'm going to eat healthy because I deserve to feel okay. I deserve to give back to myself, if that makes sense. And with that, then coming back around it, for the Gaelic4Mothers&Others, I think you probably what most people would get out of it is that connection, part of it. But I would argue that it's probably more than that, that of all of this matrix, even with regards to having webinars around nutrition and how to do that a little better, that you get, through that then an opportunity to hit all of these points. It's not so much that while as participants, you're kind of listening to this, it's actually that the Gaelic4Mothers&Others initiative in itself allows you to kind of get help with nutrition. It provides physical activity. After a good session, it should help with a good night's sleep. If it's not, tell your trainer that he needs to work or she needs to work a wee bit harder. And it also provides you with opportunities for connection. If you think about the friends that you've kind of met and the experiences of fun that you have, but really what they are, they're opportunities to be yourself and to give back to yourself. So what I would argue then in that sense, having thought about it, is that this is a strategy in itself, for looking after yourself. And with that in mind, then not that you have to do it, but that you're going to give back a little bit to yourself with that. I think that's our last slide. I'm conscious of the time. That's my time up. Yeah. There's just an opportunity if there's any questions about any of that.
Definitely not time up, Vanilla, because she's like, I like knowing the program kind of as well as I do, and I know what the participants get out of it. Like, I mean, just looking at the matrix of well-being there, like, I mean, literally ticks all of the boxes of giving back to yourself. And again, as you finished off with there, the key strategy for looking after yourself. Like, I mean, I suppose the main thing that resonated with me there was the connection, and how it's an evolutionary trait, which is a need now, essentially for us. Like, and anybody who you speak to, whether it be a Gaelic4Mothers&Others participant or it be somebody, I suppose, in a nursery program on the other end of the participation spectrum, why do you go to your training every week? Well, it's fun and my friends are there. That's the social connection. Anybody, I suppose, as you referenced, who's a former player, and you say, well, what did you enjoy about your playing days? And it was like, well, it was the crack with my teammates, and that need and that want to be part of a group. And Gaelic4Mothers&Others essentially provides that to maybe some participants who didn't play competitive football, or are coming into exercise, at the age of 25, and maybe have never taken part in structured team sports before. And this is really giving them that outlet. And it just resonated with me. Like, when you were talking about it, I was like, the matrix of well-being really, encompasses everything. And it was for me, knowing the program, it was the connection part. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's huge. And I mean, I think the interesting thing is Vinny, is that sometimes, we actually see these things as, I think, we start off in school calling them extracurricular activities, like it's something extra, like it's a luxury, to go and to football training or to meet your friends is a luxury. But actually what I would argue is that, because of the evolution of us as social creatures, it's a fundamental need, so it is. And that's the thing, just that I would encourage people, that it's not sacrificed. And especially, probably, so a lot of, the participants of Gaelic4Mothers&Others, are actually that mothers, and so, you are so much of your time, is being something for somebody else, and lives are busy, even for people who, aren't mothers. We have, but everybody has busy lives now. Everything's kind of always on the go. And with that, then you kind of see these things as trivial things that are just luxuries. And actually, what I would say is that they're not. They're fundamental needs, essentially.
Absolutely. So in the chat function there, folks, if you wouldn't mind, just type some thoughts, if you wouldn't mind. We're going to stay on for a couple of minutes after the webinar finishes, just for a little bit of a chat. So in the chat function, just in the next minute or two, if you wouldn't mind, just what was your or OIC moment from this webinar? We'd appreciate your thoughts and your engagement on that. As I said at the start, this is your opportunity now to give your thoughts or ask questions, and we'd be delighted to assist you in that. But for now, and as I said, I'm going to stay on for a couple of minutes. For now, thank you for coming on watching this video, watching this webinar, and taking part in this webinar and engaging with us. As I said, it's one in a series, so keep your eye out for the next installment coming over the next month or so. And the video of it will be up on ladiesgaelic.ie or on our YouTube channel as well. So I want to sincerely thank Fionnuala for such a fantastic webinar, and so relative to our program, and I hope that it has given people an insight into looking after yourself, and having that self-care and creating that time for yourself, and having that circadian rhythm in your sleep, and ensuring that there is a measured amount of screen time, and enjoying your social connections as well. So thank you so much to Fionnuala.
No problem.
And Fionnuala, have you anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, that's it. Just, and I mean, if people like subsequent to this, if any, have any questions or want to find out a wee bit more, I'm happy for them to, if they can get in contact with you, you can get in contact with me. We can certainly come back to anybody on anything that kind of was talked about this evening. As I say, it's, they're just kind of small kind of glimpses or snippets, of different areas, all can be talked about and developed a little bit more. So if anybody wants any more information about that, it's no problem. I'm happy to help in any way. So
absolutely perfect. Listen, folks, thank you so much. We're gonna end our recording, and if you are watching this back on our YouTube channel, I hope you've enjoyed the webinar as well. So slán live.